how to knit without looking. Hi everyone, Norman here. So when I'm here at my home, I typically sit on my home trainer while I knit. And maybe I'll watch a fun documentary or listen to a podcast or even read a couple of pages. But how do you actually learn how to knit without looking? Well, let's head over to my studio and I'll show you all my tricks. As you might have guessed, knitting without looking is a little bit more difficult than just showing you this one single trick. That's why I devised a 5-step plan to get you there, even if you are not a super experienced master knitter. However, this will take some careful planning, a bit of preparation, and quite a bit of practice. Let's get started. In the very first step, I want you to grab yourself a nice pair of needles with well-rounded tips. Those can be DPNs, circular, single-pointed needles, whatever you prefer, but the tips shouldn't be sharp. And then we need some scraps or some yarn, a very well-balanced yarn that doesn't split easily. Maybe some superwash sheep wool in a worsted weight quality, something like that, but definitely nothing that splits easily or is very fuzzy. And then I want you to knit a dishcloth, a pot holder, or maybe a mini scarf in garter stitch or stockinette stitch. It's very important that this is a simple project way below your actual skill level. Something that does not even offer the least bit of a challenge to you. And then you are going to use that project to analyze every aspect of your style. I want you to gain conscious control over your knitting, because without that control and a firm fundament, knitting without looking will not be possible. So cast on however many stitches you need, and then simply knit across a couple of rows. So don't start the next part cold-handed. I need you to warm up and find your natural knitting rhythm first. And then you stop. And from here, you need to dissect your own style. So take a look. I'm not just knitting a stitch. There are multiple different actions all my fingers perform. So I guide the needle tip here towards the left. That's more or less horizontal. Then I extend the leading leg here towards the right until the tip is barely past the working yarn. Barely past the working yarn. Then my left wrist flicks towards the center and my right wrist towards the outside. Then I pull through and both wrists snap back. Then I push the needle tip inside the stitch I'm forming so it's past the taper. Then I will tighten up. Then I lift it off by pulling the needles apart. And then my right index finger snaps forward to secure it, and then I am ready to knit the next stitch. So knitting a stitch is not just one motion, it's many that work in concert. For example, to knit a stitch I need to enter it, of course. And for the next 5-10 rows, I want you to focus just on this entering bit. And knit at a measured pace, almost in slow motion, and try to enter the knitting needle just as deeply for each and every stitch. So as you can see, I placed a little marker here with my Sharpie, and then I'm knitting super slow here, well, for my pace at least, and try to enter each stitch here, see, just as deeply. Now you might enter your stitches differently, but try to perfect it, try to do it consistently, and most importantly, give it your full attention and knit at a measured pace. And once you can consistently do this action, move onwards to the next motion. So after I inserted my knitting needle, I have to pull through. So for the next couple of rows, try to pull the yarn through in the exact same way and just as far. So don't pull one stitch through like this and the next stitch like so. Try to get it right each and every time. Again, knit at a measured pace and actively focus on every single stitch. And then move onwards to the next motion. So after I pull through, I will slide the stitch here beyond the taper. And for the next couple of rows, try to slide it to the exact same spot with each stitch. Give it your full attention and knit at a measured pace until you get it right. Now, of course, don't forget to take breaks. Now, most knitters who know how to knit without looking never did this exercise. Typically, they've been knitting for 10, 20, 30 years, and after all this experience, at one point, it kind of just happened. But that's probably not why you are here. And, if I tell you just practice for 30 years and then it's going to happen automatically, that's not really going to help you. So we want to try to speed things up and give it some structure. You will have to do this conscious, measured, slow motion training for quite a while. And this will be exhausting. It's very difficult to bring this across on camera, but you will notice that you will speed things up. That's when your subconscious is taking over again. Don't. Keep an active, measured pace and force yourself on focusing, on actively controlling the motions. Don't think, okay, I need to knit a stitch. Think, I need to enter, pull through, lift off, enter, angle the needles, pull through, angle the needles back, lift off. That's what I want you to actively think. Knitters very, very rarely actively focus on optimizing their techniques. But if you want to knit without looking, you need to be able to do it blindly, and this means you need to be in control at all times. It's a bit like throwing a ball across a field. Most people can probably do this, and if you own a dog or have kids, you probably did it a million times. But I don't need you to throw a ball. I need you to be able to throw a ball 10 times, and 10 times you hit exactly the 20 yards mark. Not 21, not 19, but 20 each time. And this is what this exercise is all about. Most importantly, at one point, you will also need to focus on the way you feed new stitches to the tip of your knitting needle. If you can't do this automatically, well, knitting without looking is probably very difficult. So here's how I do it. I bunch up quite a couple of stitches here in my fist, or rather here in between my pinky finger and ring finger, and here at the tip between my thumb and my middle finger. So those sort of act as a little reservoir here. And then my left index finger here locks on the currently active stitch. So I'm just gonna knit a couple of stitches, and I want you to focus only on my left index finger. Just focus on my left index finger. So let's analyze this. So as I knit a stitch and lift it over, this creates tension. Here, this tension is transferred via this strand. So as I lift it over, this strand sort of pulls the next stitch towards the tip. But since these stitches here are bunched up, they want to relax as well, see? So I don't really have to do anything. They kind of naturally want to move forward. So I slip off the stitch, then I release this. See how it naturally moves towards the front, and then I lock onto it again. Then I knit another stitch, and then I release it. You will notice that my index finger still does a little bit of pushing, but as I've just demonstrated, it's not all that much, and it's more just like a lifting motion. But of course, it's not only my index finger that does something. So for the next couple of stitches, I want you to focus on only my thumb and just focus on my thumb and what my thumb does as I knit stitches. So maybe you can see that my thumb is continuously doing this. So what it does is it manages, well, it acts as a buffer. So there are further stitches down here. And the thing is, if there are too many stitches here bunched up between my thumb and my tip, they will slip off. That's not very nice. And if there are too few stitches here, they actually are already relaxed, so I can't easily pull them over anymore. So my thumb is continuously checking the pressure here between these stitches. So when I knit the stitch, lift it off, release the lock on the current active stitch, here it will slide to the sweet spot. And for the next couple of rows, I want you to keep up knitting at such a measured pace. But this time, I want you to focus on the various different parts of this yarn conveyor belt, as I like to call it, that carries the stitches over from one side to the other side of your needle. You will notice that you will have to keep up a certain speed, maybe 50 or 30% of your normal speed. But if you go slower, you will notice that things start to feel a little bit awkward and you stop using the same motions. And that is why I said, go at a measured pace. Now we also have to focus here on what my right hand does. So with each stitch, my left index finger snaps forward, locks onto the stitch and pushes it further down. See? And then my thumb also pushes stitch further downward. See how they work in tandem and carry all that stitches further down. And with this practice swatch, I want you to regain control over your knitting. This will not only help you with knitting without looking, it will also improve your technique gradually. And again, please don't copy me. Analyze your style and then dissect it and bring in the control. Do it at a measured pace. This is what this is all about. Conscious control, a measured pace, and improving your technique. Once you've finished that first slow motion swatch, we can take things one step further. So after your first little potholder or whatever you've been knitting, I want you to cast on the exact same piece one more time, or maybe you've been knitting a scarf and you can just continue knitting. But this time, the focus will be on making your motions more ergonomic and faster. Ideally speaking, your technique should be quite precise now. So for short bursts, try to knit faster. So knit a couple of stitches at your slow, deliberate, measured pace. And then speed things up. Try to see how fast you can go without your technique suffering. Check your stitch definition. Are there loose stitches or so? Then slow down again and knit 1 or 2 stitches very controlled at your measured pace. And then try to speed things up again. See how fast you can go. always remember, your technique shouldn't suffer. Slow down again and then speed things up. Just a couple of stitches, slow down again. Please remember that this will be taxing on your hands, on your fingers and your wrists. So remember to take frequent breaks. Let those lessons settle into your muscles and come back half an hour later, maybe tomorrow. While you speed things up, also try to make your motions a little bit more ergonomic. So maybe your current style looks like this. I'm exaggerating now. You insert the knitting needle all the way, then you move around like this. Secure this with your index finger, pull all the way through, and then you pull the needles apart very far. Then check if you can get away with inserting the knitting needle a little bit less. Maybe by angling the knitting needles a little bit further or differently. You don't actually need the index finger, and maybe you don't need to pull the loop through all that much either. The closer you work towards the tip, the easier it will be to knit without looking, because the more actions you need to perform to knit a stitch, the harder it will be to do that blindly. Plus, it will also be more ergonomic, so I guess it is a win-win situation. So try to work even closer to the tip. Maybe take small bites of that big cake and check what you can and currently can't do. This step really is about internalizing this motion again. So in step 1, you took full control. Instead of your subconsciousness taking over and doing whatever it sees fit, you guided your needles actively. And now that you set a new and precise pattern, you can let go again. A word of warning: this typically won't happen overnight. This process might take days, sometimes even months. However, if you consciously practice instead of just knitting another project, you can actively speed things up. Still, right here, I want you to take a critical look at your project. Does it have a nice stitch definition? Are you satisfied with it? Or do you think, well, it's good, but it could look better? I mean, don't feed your inner saboteur too much. It's hand knitting, and it's that organic quality that makes it special. If you want your knitting to look like machine knit, well, then please buy a machine. At the same time, and the way I see it, there is absolutely no point in knitting without looking if you cannot produce a fabric that satisfies you when you are paying attention. I mean, it's a little bit like if you still need support wheels while riding a bike, you typically don't shout, "Look ma, no hands." So even though it might seem tedious, I feel conscious practice while paying attention and trying to perfect your fabric needs to come first. Now that we've covered the basics, we can take it one step further, and in this third step, we are going to knit in the dark. Or rather, get yourself a sleeping mask or simply shut your eyes. If you're cheating, that's on you. Again, use needles with a very well-rounded tip and your yarn that's not fluffy and doesn't split very easily. This is important, otherwise this exercise will be needlessly frustrating. And then I want you to knit one measured stitch. Take a very close look at your knitting and try to take in all the motions, the position of your fingers, the needles, and so on. And then close your eyes and knit one more stitch. Open your eyes again. And then take a look at your knitting again and knit one more stitch. But this time, try to focus on the feeling in the various different fingertips. Take a look at your knitting, but focus maybe on your left middle finger and your right index finger and knit one measured stitch. Take one last look at your knitting and then close your eyes again. Do it and listen to my voice. You should be able to feel where the next stitch is. It's secured by the tip of your left middle finger. Move it forward and backward a millimeter or two just to get a better feeling for its position. Now guide the tip of your right knitting needle towards the left. Let it lightly brush the leading leg of that stitch. That stitch should sit right below the tip of your left middle finger that secures that stitch. You should feel a little bump. That's your yarn, and if you push the tip a millimeter further to the left, you should hit the actual knitting needle. Then use the barrel of the left knitting needle and follow it with the tip of your right knitting needle towards the bottom of the knitting needle. So it's sort of like a half circular motion. Next, let the underside of the left knitting needle guide the tip of your left needle towards the right to enter the stitch. You should feel how the leading leg of that stitch offers a little bit of resistance. If you push deeper, you should be able to feel the tip of your left middle finger. And right there should also be the working yarn. It should be right between the tip of your left needle and the tip of your left middle finger. Reach around it and use the sensation of your left middle finger to guide you. Then pull it through. Again, use the left needle as a guide and more or less scratch it against the underside to pull it through, and then drop it off the left needle. Open your eyes again. So the important bit here is that you might not see anything, but you should be able to feel quite a lot. So here, your left middle finger always tells you where the stitch is. If you use your knitting needle as an actual tool and not just something to pull the yarn through, you always know that here below, if you follow the knitting needle here to the bottom and push towards the left along, you will always enter the stitch. And then if you keep the working yarn here in between the index finger and the tip, you also know, you can actually feel this, just move it up and down. You feel where the working yarn is, so you can, and this enables you to reach around, and as you pull through again, here the underside, it can help you guide things. So there is a lot of sensory feedback from your knitting needle, from the tips of your fingers, specifically these two fingers. And it's very important that you use it. If you just try to fish around here, like so, this is going to be extremely difficult because you don't really know what you're doing. But if you keep things very close to your knitting needle, you get a lot of feedback. And on top of that, by keeping things close to your knitting needle, to the tips of your knitting needle, here, these stitches always stay at the tip of your taper. And this is also important because if you push deeper like so, you will be stretching out the stitches one row below. Because here, you are forcing two knitting needles into the same stitch at the same time. This is going to stretch things out. By just here, keeping things here at the very tip of your knitting needle, close to the taper, you are not stretching out these stitches as much, and as a result, and as an extra bonus, your stitch definition will actually be a lot nicer as well. Repeat this exercise for a couple of more rows. Knit one stitch while knitting, close your eyes, knit one stitch. Knit one stitch while looking, close your eyes, knit one stitch. Open your eyes again, knit one stitch, close your eyes, and so on. Then up the ante. Knit 2 stitches while looking, close your eyes, knit 2 stitches without looking. Open your eyes again, maybe do this for a couple of rows and then knit 3 stitches without looking. And maybe at one point you will be able to knit a full row. When you want to knit without looking, you typically want to do this because you want to do other things simultaneously. But before you can do that and hope to achieve that, I feel it's very, very important that you gain control of all that sensory input you typically kind of ignore as someone who is not vision impaired. And we are trying to do this one step at a time. So this step is all about knitting blindly. Once you've mastered knitting blindly, you can progress to actually knitting without looking, or rather looking at something else. Now is the great moment. So put on your favorite YouTube creator, or I don't know, a light little drama series, something where it doesn't matter if you've missed a second or two, and then repeat the exercise from before. Knit 1 stitch while looking at your knitting, and then knit 1 stitch while looking at the screen. Then look at your knitting again, knit 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch while looking at the screen. Don't go too fast and try to knit the full row without looking at your knitting, while simultaneously trying to comprehend whatever you are seeing, or maybe you're talking with someone. And please don't go too fast. There is no need to build Rome in a day. What's more important here is that you can occasionally not look at your knitting without compromising your stitch definition. So after every row, look at your knitting and check for mistakes. Dropped stitches, split yarn, maybe just a loose stitch, or sometimes you might even accidentally knit into the stitch 1 row below, whatever. If things don't work out, try to practice a little bit more, or maybe even go a step back or multiple steps back. Review the lessons at the beginning of this video and be kind to yourself. And remember, this will be a lot easier with blunt needles and yarn that doesn't split easily, because with blunt needles, finding the entrance of your stitch is a lot easier. Now in the last step, you can try to increase the difficulty one more time. So for example, while we were touring through Madagascar last year, we had frequent power outages in the evening. And it's then typically the power would come back after 2 minutes or so, but it's then that I realized that I can knit socks on 2mm DPNs completely blindly. You know, not just 1 row, 1 needle, but completely blindly. And this unique situation kind of forced me to do this, because typically this is not what you would do. And it was actually kind of a very important personal success moment for me. To get to this point, by now you probably know how this works. Try to consciously analyze your emotions, try to internalize them, and then take it one step at a time. So maybe knit 1 rib while looking, and then knit another rib, which obviously involves here purl stitches, knit 1 rib without looking. Then maybe knit 2 ribs without looking. And then maybe if you want to knit in a round, knit across 1 gap while looking, and then knit across another gap without looking. Maybe you will get it wrong the first time, then try it again. Knit blindly first, and then in the second step only add more complexities. Know that there is a difference between passively watching a TV show, that's just distraction, and actively talking with someone, or, you know, like I did, being on the home trainer. That's true multitasking, where you need to compute, okay, what do I tell my friend? And which stitch do I need to knit next at the same time? That's multitasking, and it's a lot more difficult than just knitting blindly. We all want to knit beautiful items, but if you ask me, knitting without looking achieves little if the finished project suffers. And above all, please remember, I've been knitting for more than 35 years. If you go to your local knitting meetup or so, you will probably see people who have even more experience under their knitting belt. People who maybe are retired and do little else in their free time, but knit. And there you are juggling 2 kids and a full-time job and maybe 30 minutes of knitting 2 times a week. I can see why knitting without looking is a goal. As I've shown in the beginning, I knit while I exercise and watch documentaries or read a book. That's just so much more efficient than doing things in a row. At the same time, I cannot stress enough how advanced a technique this really is. Most of us found it naturally after years and years of knitting. And one day we basically woke up and noticed, okay, we can do this. If you want to skip ahead, this will require active and structured rehearsal. Something I actually almost never see any knitting instructor talk about. And I mean, why would we? This is a hobby after all. Yet, when you look at any professional sports player, that's actually what almost all of them do. And in fact, most professional soccer or football players only spend a fraction of their time actually playing practice matches. There's time spent in the gym, coordination training, reflex training, and a lot of theoretical rehearsal as well. Time spent on learning anatomy, the human metabolism, and optimizing their diet, and so much more. Same for professional, pianists or violin players. And the harsh truth is, not everyone won the genetic lottery or has enough time or money to practice enough to become a professional concert pianist. And that is just fine. We all have different talents. So always remember, if you cannot knit without looking yet, that doesn't mean this hobby cannot bring you joy or that you cannot finish beautiful sweaters, hats or scarves. Happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.